If you learn Chinese, you will be able to do Kung Fu naturally. As a native speaker, I can prove it. But here's something real. Mandarin Chinese alone isn't just a major language. It is, without a doubt, the most spoken language on earth by native speakers. Imagine this. Somewhere around 1.35 billion people call Mandarin their mother tongue. That's more than the entire population of North America and Europe combined. While some sources might simply declare it the most spoken language globally, it's crucial to understand this nuance. Its dominance among native speakers is absolute, but when we talk total speakers, it often vies for the top spot with English, which has a massive non-native following. The Chinese languages belong to the vast Sino-Tibetan family, sharing an ancient common ancestor with languages like Tibetan and Burmese. But here's the kicker. Pinpointing the exact moment Chinese diverged from this Proto-Sino-Tibetan ancestor is like trying to find a needle in a cosmic haystack. The evidence is scarce. What we do know is that Old Chinese, or Archaic Chinese, is the direct ancestor to every Chinese language spoken today. And this brings us to the heart of the matter, the dialects. The Chinese language isn't a single unified tongue with slight regional accents. Oh no, it's a breathtaking, often mutually unintelligible tapestry of regional varieties. Imagine trying to understand someone speaking a different language, even if they're from the same country. That's the reality for many Chinese speakers across different dialects. This is why many linguists argue these aren't just dialects, but entirely separate Sinitic languages, because the mutual intelligibility patterns resembles relationships between distinct European languages. When we talk about Chinese, we're not just talking about one language, we're talking about an entire constellation of language groups, each with its own logic, rhythm, and sound. And the differences? They're not subtle, they're profound. Let's start with Mandarin, the largest and most widespread group. I only started to speak Mandarin in high school. 因为我绘画节后，我们那儿没人说普通话，一般都是上课时候还有看电视，那主持人都说普通话了。一开始说普通话都起鸡皮疙瘩了，后来实在是因为同学听不懂才开始说的。还有去上海以后肯定得说普通话，就习惯了。Modern Standard Chinese was formally developed in the beginning of the 20th century. Its primary purpose was to serve as a lingua franca to unify a country characterized by numerous mutually unintelligible regional dialects. Beijing Mandarin Chinese formed the fundamental basis.
在伪满的那个时候，根本上我是没有这个实权。
Incorporating its phonology, vocabulary, primarily from the broader Mandarin group, and grammar derived from modern written vernacular literature. The promotion of Putonghua gained significant priority after the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949. Its tone system is like absolute value in math. What matters is the direction of pitch change. Rising, falling, dipping, not the precise height. As long as you follow the shape, like rising for tone 2 or sharply dropping for tone 4, you're understood. But then there's Cantonese, part of the Yue family. This is a whole new dimension. Imagine going from a 1D number line to a 3D coordinate space. In Cantonese, pitch height itself is crucial. A high-level tone and a mid-level tone might both be flat, but they're different tones with completely different meanings. So while Mandarin listens for contour, Cantonese demands both contour and altitude. For example, in Mandarin, shi, 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 shi are pronounced with 4 very distinct tones: high-level flat, rising, falling rising, and falling.
China, 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 China.
Each tone clearly changes the meaning of the word, but in Cantonese, tones go beyond just 4 pitch contours. Using the syllable si as an example, Cantonese includes equivalents of those 3 tones, but also introduces additional pitch levels and contours that Mandarin simply doesn't have. To illustrate this, we need to pull out a musical staff, and now it's clearer. So, si, si, si can be different words in Cantonese, and si, si too. I wonder why they don't have differently pitched falling tones like si, C. Then there's Wu, spoken in places like Shanghai and Suzhou. It's known for voiced initials, something Mandarin lost, and vowel systems that can feel almost musical. It often sounds softer and more flowing, but it's so different from Mandarin that they're not mutually intelligible. By the way, it sounds more like Japanese than Mandarin.
Anning.
Min, spoken in Fujian and Taiwan, is practically a linguistic jungle. Even two nearby towns might speak dialects so different. They can't understand each other. It has preserved many ancient features and even added its own innovations, making it one of the hardest for outsiders to learn. Hakka, though scattered across southern China and Southeast Asia, has a tight-knit sound system, almost like it was fossilized early in its development. Its tones are sharp, its syllables clipped, and it often sounds older compared to other modern dialects. Gan and Xiang, spoken in Jiangxi and Hunan respectively, live in a kind of liminal space, straddling older Chinese phonology and newer Mandarin influences. Xiang, for example, splits into old and new, the latter being more Mandarin-like, the former preserving unique tones and consonants. Jin, spoken mainly in
Shanxi,
is often debated. Is it part of Mandarin or a standalone group? Many linguists now treat it separately because it preserves glottal stops and other features Mandarin has lost. The Chinese dialect I speak is considered one variety of Jin. For example, we pronounce 中国 instead of 中国. Then there's Hui, found in the Huizhou area of Anhui. This one's a real puzzle. It's so internally fragmented that some Hui dialects are closer to Wu, while others feel almost like Min. Linguists still struggle to pin it down, and Pinghua, spoken in Guangxi, sounds like a cousin of Cantonese. It shares some features but also veers toward Mandarin in certain ways. Think of it as a transition zone between major dialects. Each group is a world of its own, not just in pronunciation, but in grammar, rhythm, and even how ideas are expressed. Understanding this diversity isn't just about language, it's about appreciating the deep cultural strata of China itself, layer by layer, tone by tone. Not every Chinese speaker uses textbook Mandarin. In fact, many speak it with distinct regional accents, shaped by their native dialect or topolect. For example, some southern speakers might struggle to distinguish between n and l, saying nai nai as lai lai. Others might replace Mandarin's retroflex sounds like zhi chi shi with simpler zi, ci, and si. So 中国 might come out as 中国. These aren't just quirks, they're linguistic fingerprints of the region's mother tongue, and they're a living reminder that Mandarin is a learned language for many, layered over deeply rooted local speech systems. This interplay between Mandarin and regional languages is part of what makes Chinese linguistic culture so rich, dynamic, and deeply human. Now let's talk about the writing system. One of the most remarkable aspects of Chinese is its ancient writing system, which has evolved over millennia but maintained a tangible link from past to present. Chinese characters originated as pictographs and logographs, symbols representing words or ideas. The story begins with the oracle bone script, used in Shang Dynasty. Priests and diviners carved questions to the gods on animal bones and turtle shells, then heated them until cracks formed, interpreting the cracks for omens. The inscribed characters on these oracle bones are the earliest confirmed Chinese writing. Even at this early stage, we see a mature system of hundreds of characters, the direct ancestors of modern Chinese words. After the oracle bone era, Chinese script went through several stylized transformations. During the Zhou dynasty and into the early imperial period, writers used variations of seal script. There were large seal and then small seal script, which was standardized under the Qin dynasty when the first emperor unified China. Small seal script has elegant, curved strokes and was the official script of the Qin. In the Han Dynasty, a more rectilinear and faster style called clerical script became widespread. Clerical script introduced the more squared, simplified shapes that made writing quicker. You can think of it as the ancient font that made lengthy documents easier to write with brush and ink. By around the 2nd to 4th centuries AD, the familiar regular script had developed. Regular script is the basis of most Chinese texts today. Those clear block characters you see in print are regular script style. Over these stages, the characters gradually became more standardized and abstract compared to their pictographic origins. For example, an early oracle bone drawing of a horse evolved into a more stylized seal script form, then into a clearly defined clerical script shape, and finally into something very close to the modern character. Despite these changes, a literate Chinese person today can still discern ancient inscriptions with some effort. The continuity of the writing system is a point of pride. Chinese characters are logographic, meaning each character represents a syllable and a unit of meaning. There is no alphabet, instead the system relies on the form of characters themselves. Over history, different script styles like cursive and semi-cursive also appeared for calligraphy, but those are more like handwriting styles. The big turning point in modern times was the creation of simplified Chinese characters in the 20th century. In an effort to boost literacy, the Chinese government in the 1950s introduced simplified versions of thousands of characters, reducing the number of strokes. The first round of official simplifications came in 1956, and a second round in 1964, standardizing the simpler forms. For example, the traditional character 学, study, with 16 strokes, was simplified to 学 with 8 strokes, and 门, door, 8 strokes became 门 with 3 strokes. The overall effect was to make writing faster and reading a bit easier, though the core structure of characters remained the same. Today, mainland China and Singapore use simplified Chinese characters as the standard, while Taiwan, Hong Kong, and many overseas communities continue to use traditional Chinese characters. It's important to note that traditional and simplified characters are not two different languages. They're just different writing conventions. In fact, they're often mutually understandable. A person from Taiwan can correspond with someone from Beijing with only minor character conversion issues. The pronunciation and grammar are the same, only the character shapes differ. Simplified characters generally have fewer strokes and simpler components than their traditional counterparts. In this example, the word love used to be written I with the heart component in the middle, but in simplified Chinese, it's this I with the heart removed. The traditional form I has 13 strokes, whereas simplified one has only 10. Mainland Chinese learned the simplified set, finding it quicker to write, while readers of traditional characters often appreciate the aesthetic complexity and historical richness of the older forms. Importantly, the pronunciation doesn't change. I and I are both I. They're simply two visual ways to represent the same word. So whether one writes dragon as traditional one or simplified one, it's the same mighty long in speech. Being aware of both systems is useful for Chinese learners, but you can usually focus on one and still communicate effectively since literacy tools or context can bridge the gap. Traditionally, Chinese text was written vertically. However, in modern times, left-to-right horizontal formatting is now more common and compatible with the digital world. It's worth mentioning the pinyin system. Adopted in 1958, pinyin is a standard spelling system that utilizes the Roman alphabet to represent the pronunciation of Chinese characters. Its main aims were to facilitate the spread of Putonghua and aid in the learning of Chinese characters. It's also the reason why I type faster than my Taiwanese friend. Grammar often makes or breaks a language learning experience, and here I will only talk about Mandarin Chinese grammar. Mandarin Chinese grammar has its own unique charm. The good news is Mandarin is an analytical language with relatively simple rules, especially when it comes to word forms. In Mandarin, words never change form based on tense or case or gender. That means no conjugations, no inflections, no plurals on nouns in most cases. A verb like 吃, to eat, stays eat in every situation. I eat, you eat, yesterday eat, tomorrow eat. You don't add endings or change the spelling. A Chinese word is invariable in form, which means you won't be bogged down memorizing verb tables or noun declensions. This simplicity is one reason some find Chinese grammar refreshingly straightforward. especially if you've struggled with languages like French or Russian that have a lot of verb conjugations. However, simple form doesn't mean there is no grammar at all. Mandarin relies on word order and particles to convey what other languages might express with conjugation. The basic sentence structure is subject, verb, object, SVO structure, just like English. For example, 我爱你 literally is I love you in the same order as English. To ask a question, you can add the particle 吗 at the end of a statement. 你好吗 literally you good, meaning how are you? Are you well? There are also special aspect particles like 了 to indicate a completed action or 正在 to indicate an ongoing action. For example, 我吃饭 means I eat, and 我吃了饭 means I ate. The verb 吃 didn't change at all. Past tense is implied by adding 了 or by context. This means context and time words like today, tomorrow, already play a big role in Chinese grammar. Another hallmark of Mandarin and most Chinese dialects is the use of classifiers, also known as measure words. In Chinese, you cannot directly say 3 paper or 2 cow. You must insert the appropriate measure word. The general purpose classifier is 个, so 3 people is 3个人, but Chinese has dozens of specific classifiers. For example, 一匹马 is 1 horse, using 匹 for horses, and 一张纸 is 1 sheet of paper, using 张 for flat objects. It may sound cumbersome, but it becomes second nature and adds color to the language. Nouns get paired with a special word that often hints at their shape or category. You will hear 个 very frequently for people and general things, 本 for books, 杯 for cups of something, etc. It's a distinctive feature that learners must master since only classifiers can be counted. You never say 2 books as 二书 or 两书. It must be 两本书. Mandarin's lack of inflection also means many words can play flexible roles. A Chinese word doesn't change to show if it's a noun, verb, or adjective. Often the same word can serve as any part of speech depending on context. Take 新, which means new, can be an adjective in 新车, new car, or act like an adverb newly in 新知道, to newly find out, though in the latter case, Chinese might use other structures. Another example is 慢, means slow, and you can say 走慢一点, meaning walk more slowly. Here, the adjective slow is used in an adverbial way without adding any suffix like 里. This flexibility is possible because Chinese relies on word order and helper words rather than word endings to convey grammatical relationships. There are also preposition-like particles that indicate things like location, direction, or comparisons. For example, 在 at, 从 from, 比 than. 他在家 means he's at home. The verb to be can often be omitted or understood from context in Chinese. Since Chinese heavily depends on context, words can be ambiguous without it and lead to many memes. All in all, Mandarin grammar is a different logic, but one that can be refreshingly logical. Once you get used to the idea of using sense words like time words or aspect markers instead of conjugation, you might enjoy the Lego-like way you can build sentences. No fussing with verb endings or agreement, which is quite a relief. As we delve into vocabulary next, keep in mind how grammar and vocabulary intertwine. Because grammar doesn't carry as much info in endings, individual words and their order do a lot of work to convey meaning. Chinese vocabulary is a treasure trove that reflects its long history and ability to absorb new ideas. If you open a Chinese dictionary, you will find a mix of very old words and modern inventions or loans for new concepts. One fundamental thing to know: most Chinese words are short, often just 1 or 2 syllables or characters. Classical Chinese was largely monosyllabic, with each character a standalone word. Modern Mandarin, however, relies much more on compound words than ancient Chinese did. Over time, sound changes and the vast growth of homophones made it useful to combine characters into dissyllabic words for clarity. For example, the word for river in classical times was just 河 or 江. But nowadays, people often say 河流 or 江河 to specify river in general. The word for to study used to be just 学, but now 学习 is common. These compound words reduce ambiguity by pairing characters together. With over 1 billion people and relatively few syllables, Chinese needed to make sure there weren't too many collisions in meaning. Chinese builds new words primarily by compounding, sticking together 2 or more characters to form a new concept. Each character has 1 or more meanings, and by joining them, you create a precise term. For example, 电脑 is computer, literally an electric brain. 手机 is cell phone, hand plus machine, a hand machine. 图书馆 is library. 图书 books plus 馆, building or hall, essentially a book building. Once you know basic characters, these compounds are often delightfully logical or metaphorical. This also means when a new invention or concept comes along, Chinese often creates a descriptive compound instead of borrowing a foreign word. For instance, 飞机 for airplane literally means flying machine, and 电脑, as we saw, is electrical brain for computer. This tradition of calquing new words gives Chinese vocabulary an internally consistent feel. New tech words still sound Chinese. It's quite fun as a learner to guess meanings from the parts. 消防车 fire engine, literally fire extinguished vehicle. 洗碗机 dishwasher, wash bowl machine. 网络 internet, net web. That said, Chinese does borrow words from other languages when needed, usually by adapting the pronunciation or translating the meaning. Historically, neighboring cultures influenced Chinese vocabulary. For example, Buddhism brought in many Sanskrit terms around 1500 years ago, words like 菩萨 or 和尚. Later dynasties saw some influence from Mongolia and Manchu during periods of minority ethnicity rule. For instance, the Qing dynasty gave Beijing dialect some loanwords from Manchu. In modern times, especially late 19th and early 20th century, a huge influx of new concepts from the West, science, politics, technology, needed new Chinese words. Interestingly, many of these were first formulated in Japan and then imported into Chinese. During the Meiji era, Japanese scholars coined terms using Chinese characters for Western ideas. Words like 哲学 philosophy, 经济 economy, 文化 culture, and 民主 democracy are all wasei kango, Japanese-made Chinese words, later adopted into Chinese. So if a Chinese term sounds oddly literal, it might be an import from Japanese coinage in the early 1900s. Chinese embraced these terms and they are now standard vocabulary. Direct loanwords from English and other European languages also exist, but are less common relative to the size of the lexicon. Usually, loans are for things like foods, foreign places, or pop culture. They're either transliterations or semantic loans. A few examples: 咖啡 for coffee, 巧克力 for chocolate is another phonetic rendering. 沙发 for sofa comes from the sound of sofa. Interestingly, 巴士 is used for bus, especially in Hong Kong or for tour bus. It's a borrowing from English bus, rendered in Cantonese-influenced pronunciation. And 的士 for taxi comes from Cantonese pronunciation of taxi. Another cute one is 麦当劳 for McDonald's. Not an exact sound match, but close enough and using characters that mean nothing related to hamburgers. This said, the minority ethnicity names are also transliterated. If your name is John or Fred, your name in Chinese will be 乔恩 or 弗雷德.
这不是你的风格了，杰斯。
For translations of meaning, take 热狗, literally hot dog. Chinese just translated the English words hot and dog for the food item. Chinese tends to resist pure foreign spellings. There's no alphabet to just import a word as it is, so everything gets synthesized to fit Chinese phonetics. In recent times, you will see some use of English acronyms or terms in writing, like DNA is often just written as the letters DNA in the Chinese text, and CPU or USB must be left as is. But for the most part, the vocabulary stays Chinese-looking. Finally, let's talk about homophones and how they affect vocabulary. Chinese has relatively few possible syllables, about 400 distinct syllables without tones, or around 1300 including tones in Mandarin. This is small compared to, say, English, which has many thousands of possible syllables. The result is that many characters or words share the exact same pronunciation, especially once you ignore tones or if you mispronounce tones. For instance, the syllable shi is famously overloaded. There are dozens of characters pronounced shi in various tones, meaning everything from lion, shi, to 10, shi, to city, shi, to be, shi. A classic quip is the Chinese poem Shi 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 Shi, the story of Mr. Shi eating lions, which is composed of 92 characters all read as some variation of shi, a tongue twister that shows how writing is needed to tell words apart since many sound identical. Because of this, Chinese vocabulary often pairs syllables into compounds to reduce confusion. For example, 熊 means bear and 猫 means cat, but a panda is called 熊猫, literally bear cat. Why? Possibly to differentiate from other meanings of 熊 or 猫 alone. Another example, 春 means spring, but it's often said as 春天, adding 天 to clarify it's the season, since 春 alone could also evoke other meanings. So Chinese words have evolved in such a way as to balance the limited sound inventory, either by compounding or using context. Since vocabulary is tightly tied to the tone system, I have to bring it up again. Mandarin Chinese is a tonal language, meaning the pitch contour with which you pronounce a syllable is as important to the meaning as the consonants and vowels. Standard Mandarin has 4 main tones: a high-level tone, first tone, a rising tone, second tone, a low dipping tone, third tone, and a sharp falling tone, which is the fourth tone, plus a neutral tone on some syllables. Using the classic example ma with different tones, this can mean mother, ma, hemp, ma, horse, ma, or scold, ma, among other possibilities. As you can imagine, getting the tone wrong can lead to some funny misunderstandings. No one wants to accidentally call their mom a horse. Tones are marked in pinyin with accent marks ma, 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 ma. They're an integral part of each syllable, so much so that if 2 words differ only by tone, they're considered completely different words. For example, tang means sugar or candy, while tang means soup. Mastering tones is often the toughest hurdle for new learners, since most Western languages don't have this feature. But context also helps, and Chinese people are used to figuring out what you mean if your tones are a bit off, as long as the context is clear. Tones also mean Chinese has a higher information density in some sense. Every syllable carries a tone and a sound, packing more distinctive code into short words. This allowed classical Chinese to be extremely concise. But as mentioned, even with tones, Chinese has loads of homophones. It's said that modern Standard Chinese has fewer distinct syllables than Middle Chinese did, because many sounds merged over time. In contrast, Cantonese has retained more tones and final consonants, giving it around 2,200 syllable tone combinations and thus somewhat fewer homophones for the same set of concepts, which is why Cantonese speakers can sometimes get by with more single-syllable words. In Mandarin, context is king. If I just say 睡 out of the blue, do I mean sleep or text? You'd only know from the context. In practice, Chinese sentences provide enough clues to figure it out, and many words are dissyllabic, which also helps disambiguate. This homophone richness gives rise to a lot of puns and wordplay in Chinese culture. For instance, the number 4 is considered unlucky because it sounds like death in Mandarin. There are different tones, but close enough for superstition. Similarly, ba is lucky because it sounds like prosper, fa. During Chinese New Year, you will see 88 or 888 decorations because it's like wishing double prosperity. Companies love phone numbers or prices with 8 for the same reason. You can see Chinese on the internet replying to certain thing with single number 6 or 666, which means it's very cool. And Chinese is full of Chengyu and idioms that often rely on puns or classical references. Speaking of Chengyu, these are the famous 4-character idioms deeply ingrained in Chinese language and culture. A Chengyu is typically a set phrase, usually 4 characters, that encapsulates a story, moral, or image, often from ancient literature or history. Or think of it as a meme concluded in 4 characters. There are literally thousands of them. They're used prolifically in writing and occasionally in speech to convey a lot with a few words. For example, 画蛇添足 means to draw a snake and add legs to it. Coming from a fable about an artist who ruined his painting by overdoing it. It now means to spoil something by adding unnecessary details. Another well-known one, 掩耳盗铃, cover one's ears while stealing a bell, referring to a thief who foolishly thought if he couldn't hear the bell, no one else could. It means to deceive oneself. Chengyu often derive from classical Chinese phrasing, so they can be grammatically different from modern Chinese. In classical Chinese, 文言文, which was the written standard for millennia, sentences were extremely compact and many function words were omitted. Chengyu preserves that brevity. For instance, 入乡随俗 means enter village, follow customs, which is basically the Chinese equivalent of when in Rome, do as the Romans do. It's ungrammatical in modern Mandarin. If expanded fully, you'd have something like 建议入一个乡村就要遵循那里的风俗, but the 4-character form is understood as a set saying. Educated speakers pepper their language with Chengyu to add color or express an idea succinctly. Even if you don't use many yourself, recognizing common ones really helps in appreciating Chinese text and media, since they frequently appear in everything from news headlines to TV dramas. Finally, a note on classical versus modern usage. As mentioned earlier, China underwent a language reform in the early 20th century where classical Chinese, the archaic literary language that had been used in writing for thousands of years, was replaced by written vernacular Chinese, 白话文, based on modern spoken Mandarin. This was as revolutionary for Chinese society as if Europeans had suddenly decided to write everything in spoken dialect instead of Latin. The result today is that everyday writing, newspapers, novels, textbooks, is in a style close to spoken Mandarin, which is much easier for the average person to learn and read. Classical Chinese hasn't died though. It's taught in schools in the form of old poems, classics, and historic texts, and it heavily influences formal or literary style. Many set phrases, idioms, proverbs, and political slogans use classical syntax or vocabulary for effect. For example, a modern newspaper might use a headline like 改革春风吹满地, which has a poetic classical ring to it, even though the article itself will be in modern language. Learning Chinese thus gives you a window into 2 worlds, modern colloquial form and the succinct classical form that condenses profound meaning into a few characters. It's a bit analogous to an English speaker learning some Latin phrases or Shakespearean quotes. It enriches understanding and connects you to cultural heritage. Chinese is often called one of the hardest languages to learn, and it's true it presents challenges like mastering tones and memorizing characters. But it's also immensely rewarding, because with each phrase you learn, you tap into a cultural legacy thousands of years in the making. Whether it's using an idiom from 孙子兵法 or cracking a pun about the number 8, you're engaging with a living history, and Chinese is very much alive and dynamic. New slang emerges on the internet every day, dialects mix with standard Mandarin in music and film, and the language continues to globalize as more people around the world pick up Mandarin as a second language. It's a language where ancient poetry and modern pop songs coexist, where a single character can be a profound concept or just a casual exclamation. Learning Chinese rewires how you think, not just linguistically, but conceptually. It challenges you to notice tone, rhythm, nuance, and context in entirely new ways. It's like exercising a new part of your brain, and the more you explore, the more rewarding it becomes.